Today is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Greetings, St. John family, and welcome to today's virtual worship experience. Please be reminded that members of the finance team will be here today from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to receive your tithes and offerings. You may also take advantage of use of our Cash App. Please be reminded that God loves a cheerful giver. And now let us be blessed with a word from our pastor, Reverend Washington.
Good morning and welcome. This is truly a day the Lord has made. I am Richard Allen Washington Sr., and I'm grateful to be with you today. Thank you for joining St. John Church in Columbus, Georgia, where God is truly leading us to higher heights. We are excited to have you. We welcome you once again into our sanctuary, and although pews are empty, the heart of St. John is on fire for God. I want to remind you that God is in the blessing business, not for you, but through you. I want to remind you, because I know this to be true, God does not bless us so that we can hoard everything. God blesses us so he can get something to someone else through us. And today I'm excited. St. John is going to be blessed, not because of our own gifts that God has, but because we want to give those gifts to you. And today God has gifted us with a word from on high. God has gifted us especially for you. If you're tuning in today, I want you to know it's not by accident. It is because God had something just for you through us. And St. John and I are excited. So let's go right to the word. Do me a favor. Listen to the whole broadcast, because at the end, St. John members, we have a special announcement that we want you to be a part of and to hear. And so I'm asking that you would stay tuned after the sermonic moment. Would you do me a favor? Get your Bible, whether it's one of the hard copies or the phone copy, or if you're just waiting for us to put it on the screen, that's fine too. Do me a favor, get your Bible. God has directed us for the next 4 weeks, mind you, to a wonderful book in the Bible. We will stay with one book and one chapter for the next 4 weeks. It's going to be so exciting, family. I am really excited to see what God reveals to us in this one chapter. Mark chapter 6. You know Mark, one of my favorite gospels, one of my favorite books in the whole narrative. God arrested my attention this whole week, and I spent time with God in Mark chapter 6, and God is not releasing us after one Sunday. So Mark chapter 6, and today we will start at verse 45. Mark chapter 6 and verse 45. When you get there, would you do me a favor and just say amen? Going a little old school, not I got it, none of that, just old school, amen. And if you really feel good, you ought to go real old school, and when you get to Mark chapter 6, verse 45, go on, stand up at the reading of God's word. That's an inside joke for some of my dear family members. That's an inside joke. Listen, stand to hear the word of God in Mark chapter 6. Verse 45 is where we start. I'm standing. Won't you rest on your feet today and hear God's word today? Shall we get ready to be blessed by the word? Immediately, he made his disciples, and pay attention to that. He made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to a place called Bethsaida, some say Bethesda, while he dismissed the crowds. After he had taken leave from them, he went up to the mountain to pray. And when evening came, when the night had fallen, the boat was on the sea, and Jesus was alone on the land. And Jesus saw them making their painful headway, because winds were against them. And about the fourth watch of the night, about 2 a.m., he came to them. He was walking on water. He meant to pass by them, but when they saw Jesus walking on water, they began to think it was a ghost, and they cried out, for they were terrified at seeing him. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased. And they were utterly astonished, for they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. Amen. And let's get right to work. I want to talk today from the subject matter with God's Holy Spirit guiding us in our moment together. A pandemic, politics, and the presence of God. A pandemic, politics, and the presence of God. You know, Mark is really one of my favorite gospels because Mark has a tendency to touch people like you and me. Anyone listening at me right now understands that we are in the midst of a pandemic. And when you look up the definition of a pandemic, it simply means that a widespread virus or disease that touches all of a country or world. And for all intents and purposes, we have reached a moment of high pandemic proportions. Mark understands that. Mark understands how people who are not living in the freedom of society, but in the margins of society, are going to make it. Mark's gospel is for you, and it's certainly for me. If we tell the truth, each and every one of us have been in a position where we are is not in the black, but we are really on the fringes beyond the red. We are in trouble. We have survived, but we're just holding by the hair, old school, of our chinny chin chin. We, my brothers and sisters, understand the difficulty that life can give to us. And Mark is writing to us. The people that Mark wrote to, who this gospel was geared toward, in the contemporary sense of the word, were those who just knew how difficult life could be. They were not upper class. They were not even middle class. They were really the bottom of the class. But Mark, being directed by God, inspired by Christ, wrote to them about what Jesus could do with people in our predicaments. And so I gather God's word today. I listened carefully to God, and God directed me to chapter 6, verse number 45. And that's where we are. We're in the midst of seeing a pandemic. We're in the midst of seeing politics, and yes, we're going to see the presence of God. I want you to understand that this story has a powerful beginning because it comes off of the end of an extraordinary miracle. It comes on the end of Jesus healing, if you will, a situation that needed. It comes at the end of the feeding of the 5,000. My brothers and sisters, you know, there are some of us who right now are waiting for September to come because we know when September gets here, those of us who are fans of the blockbuster star series Power will at least tune in to the first episode of the new edition of Book 2, Ghost. I'm not pleased about my favorite actor in the series not being present, Ghost, James St. Patrick, but I am going to see just a little bit of how Power Book 2, Ghost, is going to go. And so after an extraordinary beginning, as Power Book 1 has, everybody is just waiting to see if it can be equaled. And likewise, come on close, I'm bringing it home. The disciples have seen Jesus heal, if you will. I want to say heal because to feed 5,000 men, not to mention women and children, is more than just a miracle of food. It's a healing situation. If you've never been hungry, you can never appreciate the fact that healing can come through being fed. And brothers and sisters, Mark is really telling us something powerful as he's linking one amazing miracle of the feeding of the 5,000s ending and starting us hook, line, and sinker, if you will, with Jesus in verse number 45. So I needed to paint that picture a little bit so that you could really get a pandemic, politics, and the presence of God. Here is what I'm trying to hope. Here's what I'm hoping will happen today. I'm hoping you will see how the pandemic that the disciples experience and the politics they experience is parallel to what we are experiencing right now. Now let's go to work, shall we? In this 45th verse, we are blessed to hear the writer suggest something that I don't want you to miss, that Jesus makes his disciples get into the boat and go to the other side without him. The Greek suggests, my brothers and sisters, we have the translation that says made. The Greek suggests they were unwilling. So you could easily put Jesus makes unwilling disciples go to the other side without him. And I want to go ahead, you got it, you know what's coming, and tell you right here, this is truly, Giselle, a powerful moment. I want us to see this hermeneutical kickstand that Jesus has to make his disciples go without him. They still don't get it. Here is the connector. They've just seen Jesus actually feed 5,000 people plus. And if God has done something like that in your life, in your view, in your peripheral, in your eyesight, don't you think you might want to do whatever he tells you to do without giving God any trouble? Maybe, I don't know about you, but when someone shows me that they can do something as extraordinary as that, I am not going to argue too much with them about what they're asking me to do, because they might do something to you that causes you to be in trouble. But the disciples just don't get who Jesus is. And that's what I want us to understand. Even in the midst of God doing a move like that, even in the midst of God, watch this, coming to your house, having supplied your needs, having brought you through difficulties, having fed you when you were hungry, having paid bills for you, and if not, having kept, watch this, lights on, having kept water on, having kept heat on and air on, in the midst of you not being able to take care of it, you don't lose anything. In this pandemic, God has been so favorable and so wonderful to us that even when we couldn't do some things, God made sure that we were not outed. And if you haven't shouted in the last 6 months about God doing that, you ought to do it now. That in the midst of a pandemic, when everybody is affected and everybody is struggling and everybody is wondering where the next meal is going to come from, the next check is going to come from, the next job is going to come from, listen, the next bank statement is going to produce, you need to thank God who has supplied your need in the midst of this pandemic. The disciples are just like us. God has just done a wonderful act at the end of verse 44, and yet they struggle, family, to trust Jesus and take him at his word. That's what I want you to catch. He makes them, and I don't want you to miss that sometimes Jesus has had to make us do some things even when he's blessed us. The disciples get in the boat reluctantly. You've been there. Have you actually followed the instructions of Jesus? Have you followed the voice of God reluctantly? They reluctantly get in and watch what takes place. Jesus doesn't go with them. Now I could imagine they may have felt some type of way since he tells them, y'all head over and I'm going to stay and dismiss the crowd. Why can't we stay? Why can't we see what you're going to do? Why can't we be a part? And someone may have said he could do something more extraordinary than the last. That's a little nosy. And I know there are some folk listening and looking today that you are just as nosy and just as into somebody else's Kool-Aid as the disciples were. You are just as messy as some people that you have laughed at. You have always wanted to put your nose in what someone else is doing. And even when the Lord has instructed you to stay focused and to turn and go forward, you are more interested in what somebody else has going on with God through Christ Jesus, and you want to see it. Let me pause and say to you today, if the Lord directs you to move forward while he's still working on some other people, don't pay attention, don't get grouchy, don't get mean, don't get arrogant, don't get haughty. You ought to go ahead and move without reluctancy into what God has told you to do. You will mess yourself up looking at what God is doing in the life of someone else. You need to focus on what God is doing in your world. So the disciples reluctantly move forward. And you know what? I can't let it go yet. Because I understand that when you are reluctant to leave someplace, when you're reluctant to let go of something, when you're reluctant to follow Jesus, even though you've seen him do an extraordinary thing in your presence, you aren't fully engaged with where God would have you. And that's what I want you to understand. The disciples are going to pay a price because they're not fully engaged in doing what the Lord has told you to do. Let me pause and say to all church members, let me pause and say to those who serve in positions of leadership, it is vital and important that at this moment in your church's history, that you pay not attention to what the Lord has done for someone else or is doing in someone else's camp, but that you press forward to what God is doing in yours. There is no reason for the church to be at competition with each other. You need to focus on where God has told you to go and get moving, because God has got a blessing for you even when you don't see it. And you might say, oh, that's good, but I don't understand the correlation. Listen, pay attention. He tells them, Jesus, to get into a boat. And whether you recognize this or not, family, the boat, the ship that is taking place in this context is also symbolic, because the church, the congregants of God, the people of God, the followers of Jesus have always been referred to, get this, as a ship. That's why favorite songs of ours truly resemble songs that have ship-like tendencies. Let me see if I can make it live. Do you recognize that there are many songs in the history of the Christian faith that give reference to God doing things on the stormy seas? The reason is because people have identified that believers are a part of a fellowship, which is a part of a larger ship that God is sailing across time. One of my favorite songs I still love. I like to hear anybody who can sing it. It's simply the old ship of Zion. 'Tis the old ship of Zion. It is so powerful to recognize that God through the ages has seen us as his people gathering on a ship and having to go through the difficulties of life on the ship. So Jesus is telling the disciples, get in a boat, fellowship, get in a boat and go to the other side. Churches, we are a part of a ship. The faithful are part of a ship. And right now, in this rocky and tough sea, we are experiencing a lot of turbulence on the ship. But if you can do what the Lord has told you to do, God is going to show up in the middle of our ship storm. He tells them to go ahead. He's got business with the others, and he sends them ahead. Now, here's what I like. The text says that Jesus, after he leaves them, is alone on the land, and they are in the water. Jesus clearly, according to Mark, has separated himself. He is no longer with them. They are separate. And beloved, you need to see the amazing contrast. Jesus on land, disciples in a ship together on sea. You got to understand that the crowd that Mark was writing to and the disciples were a part of a culture called Near Eastern. And in the Near Eastern community, ships and seas were dangerous places because they had, watch this, divine possibilities. And the disciples, do you realize that they were experienced sailors? These are not sailors who just got started. These are persons who had left sailing and fishing to follow after Jesus. So they are experienced sailors. They've got years of coursework. They know how to navigate. But the text tells us that while they are at sea, something takes place, and watch, Jesus on land, not in it, is watching them. I want to pause and say that this is a very real moment, that it may seem that while we are in the course of a pandemic, that it looks like Jesus is not present in the ship with us. because we know this truth. Whenever Jesus is present, that sickness and disease and failure and fatigue have a way of getting out of sight. Jesus is not with them, family. He is on land and they are at the sea. Have you ever felt in the midst of this pandemic that you were so far away from Jesus, you couldn't see him and he can't see you? But the text tells us this truth: you are never beyond the sight of God. That's the first thing I want you to recognize and be able to shout about in the midst of a pandemic, politics, and the presence of God. You are never out of the sight of God. The text reveals that Jesus sees them, but they don't see him. I can shout all by myself off of that fact right there, that truth moment right there. Listen, God always sees us, even when we can't see God. And I don't know about you, but after learning about spiritual warfare, I have accepted that demonic adjutants work hard to make sure that I don't see God when I need to see God. And maybe you're in the midst of a troublesome storm now where you can't see God. I've come to lift your head to let you know that God sees you. Jesus is on land and the text testifies that he sees them. I want to stay right here because somebody that's listening at me, I might be preaching to myself too. You cannot see God right now. You don't understand where God is. You can't find God. I can promise you that God knows exactly where you are, even if you don't know where God is. The disciples, watch this, cannot see because the demonic adjutant storm sea has enacted its power. That's why I want you to catch this. Remember I told you that in Near Eastern culture, the disciples and the time frame that Mark is writing to, they understood that the sea was a part of divine control. And so get this, anything that could happen on the sea was out of their hands and out of their understanding, and they had chalked it up to spiritual dimensions. That's just like us, because when something starts to happen and unfold in our community, in our culture, in our personal lives and families, and we don't comprehend, we immediately understand or put it on the fact that it's something happening in the spirit realm. I'm taking my time today because you got to get this. You got to see God connecting spiritual warfare to this right here. Check this out, family. Be clear about it now. Whenever you are in the midst of a storm, you, just like the disciples and those participants that Mark is writing to, must understand that what you can't control, watch this, here comes Ephesians chapter 6. We are warring not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities in where? High places. The spirit realm is at work. And never, as I said before last week, never underestimate the power of the spirit realm. When you can't comprehend what's happening in your life, you better recognize that the spiritual powers in high places are at work and warfare is taking place. The disciples, I'm bringing it to you, are actually in a storm, and the problem is they recognize, family, that while they are in a storm, it's of divine proportion. They can't see God, but they know something divine is at work. And there comes a moment, family, when you can't see God. You got to remember that God divine is at work. The disciples are afraid, though, because they can't see. And I want to pause and make it live. I have discovered something that's going to make you shout because it sure blessed my life. When we get out of storms, when we are delivered from bad situations, whether it's a relationship, job, church, family, relation, friendship, whatever it might be, when we are delivered, most of us would just shout over the fact that God got us out. But I've learned that the real shout is never that you've been delivered. Have mercy. But the real shout that I'm learning to give is that God has shown me something in the storm that I didn't see beforehand. That's old school. That means that I'm not celebrating that I got out. I'm celebrating about what I learned as I was going through the storm. The disciples are about to have an opportunity, family, to learn something about God's power in the midst of a pandemic and politics. And can I pause and say right now, beloved, that we can shout, not because COVID-19 is over, not because Donald Trump is no longer the president, not because the governmental legislative acts are being transformed. We can celebrate and we can shout because of the lessons that God is teaching us in the midst of COVID-19. Anybody learn a lesson now that you didn't know before it happened? Anybody can see clearer now because of what you learned in this pandemic that you didn't know before? Anybody know how to take care of your stuff better now because of what the pandemic forced you to do? If you never had a problem, you wouldn't know God could solve them. Now, that wasn't in the sermon. That's just what God blessed with in this moment. The text testifies that the disciples, I'm hitting it hard today, the disciples are on a stormy sea, and it says in your version, yours may read a little different because I got the original Greek, your version may say that they were struggling and straining as they were in the midst of the storm or the sea. Listen, be clear. They were trying to move forward, but the wind was actually causing them, watch this, family, to go nowhere. There are moments in life when we are going where God instructed us against our will to go, when we are rolling forward and we get hit with a storm-like circumstance and a wind comes out of nowhere, divine, and we are held up from going anywhere and we feel like we're just pedaling and getting nowhere. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody in the midst of this pandemic feel like no matter how much ground you try to cover, you always end up back where you start? Listen, I used to hear my mama say, doggone it, every time I think I've gotten ahead, something comes and knocks me back, and I feel like I've not gone any steps further. Let me pause and say, God is trying to teach you a lesson. God is revealing something if you can stop being hard-headed and soft behind enough to get it. The disciples are trying to move forward, but they haven't learned a lesson. And so since they hadn't learned a lesson, the wind has come to hold them up. You don't believe me? Look at the end. I'm going to show you. I want you to catch this. They are not beyond the sight of God, but they can't see. And the reason is because they didn't learn a lesson in the feeding of the 5,000, which is the politics. Here it is. Here's the politics. Listen, when you look to define what politics mean, it means the work of groups in attempts to govern or to administrate larger groups. Politics is not just about Democrat, Republican, red or blue. It's not about white and black. It's not about brown, black, and white. No. Politics at its core is about people trying to administrate a particular way of life and others trying not to follow suit. In the politics of the text, here it is. Jesus feeds 5,000, but here's the politics. He has to have the disciples tell the people to sit down on the ground so that they can receive what they need. Politics. In order to get what you need, you've got to do what? Sit down on the ground so he can pass out what you need. Politics. Come here. We have just finished watching a Democratic convention. And all we heard this week more than anything was that we don't have the right leadership at this time occupying the office of presidency to get us through the pandemic. Some excited when Michelle Obama said these words, "It is what it is. He is not able to do it." Some got excited as we learned more about Joe and Jill Biden. We learned that Joe Biden understands heartache and heartbreak since he was a kid. And we've learned that Jill Biden knows how to put things back together because she put Joe and his family back together after their hearts were broken. In essence, they were trying to show us, family, that they can lead this country through what we're going through the heartache of loss of family, through the heartache of loss of job and income, through the heartache. They were trying to show us that at America's core, Jill and Joe Biden had the the capacity, the empathy, and the experience, and possibly, watch this, the wisdom now to lead this country as a world power through the rest of COVID-19 and the pandemic. That's really what they were trying to tell us. And they went 4 days, have mercy, too long, to try to get us to that point. Come here. America has yet to learn a lesson that politics and the way we've tried to administrate the gifts of life, liberty, and justice, which don't belong to us, they belong to God. We have not learned the lesson that we cannot have politics without God instructing people, and we are willing to follow. So a pandemic is going on, and politics now is at work, because politics is trying to administrate in a pandemic without looking toward God to finding what God has got to say. This is why churches cannot be silent. This is why pastors must preach difficult messages. This is why leadership in local parishes must not talk about how we're going to do, but we must talk about praying and fasting and trusting and leaning not to our own understanding. We got to do that, because while we're trying to move forward and roll forward, we are not going anywhere, and the lesson has yet to be learned. Are you with me? It's a lot, but I love it. Text says that they are caught and can't move forward. And remember, they can't see God, but God can see them. I want to make this live. I really want to make this live. I need for this to live. I was talking with a Catholic priest. We have a great relationship, and we trust each other with the difficult aspects of leading parishioners. And we talked about this for quite some time, a little over 2 years now. This priest was assigned to a particular parish that was in a particular kind of chaos. And he was instructed to go there and lead this parish through. He had served for a good while. He's got years. He's got 20 plus years of experience following God and leading parishes. The challenging thing, family, was this. At his age, he felt that he should not have to endure the struggle and the strain that he was having to endure due to this parish problem. That's real. And he expressed to me that he was angry that God had forced him to go through this type of struggle at this time in his life. And I had to sit with him, and we began to wrestle and work through just listening. Sometimes people don't need you to solve anything. They just need you to listen. The ministry of listening is underused, and it's not even valued in the household of faith. Sometimes hush and just listen. And so I just listened to him. And as I listened to him, Rem Hodges, as I listened to him, Deacon Davis, as I listened to him, what he revealed to me after getting a lot of that out, Angel, is this. Reverend friend, it hit me after taking my frustrations and anger to God day after day and night after night. He said, it hit me that the reality was I was egotistical, narcissistic, and self-aggrandizing. And my parish and its problems had been sent by God. He said my storm, my parish, my problems at the parish was my storm sent by God to reveal, watch this, what I'm about to tell you. He said, preacher, friend, at the truth, when I took a real hard look at the situation, what was being revealed in me were insecurities that I had and covered up with surface level success, all of my ministry. But the insecurities that were being revealed in the current parish and storm were originally from my childhood. They were things that I had never addressed, things that I had never gotten over, things that I carried in my bag of put in the closet and hide. Now I had to face. And he says what happened was God had instructed a storm to come to expose what I was running from. And I now had to face it head on. Come here close. You are in the midst of a storm now. You're in the midst of a pandemic now, and politics is at work trying to tell you this is what you need to do, and this is how you need to move, and this is why you need to move that way. Guess what? All of that's happening. You can't see God. God sees you, and God has allowed you to drive, to roll right into a storm, and you're straining and struggling and not going anywhere. And what God wants you to do is to take a moment and think about what's really bothering you. It ain't the storm. It's what the storm is revealing. It's what you've been ignoring. It's what God intends to mature in us so that as we move forward, we are not plagued by what we haven't dealt with even since we were children. Come here, church. Come here, church. Some of us churches are going to repeat the same lessons over and over, regardless of who our pastor or priest is, because we refuse to learn the lessons that God has attempted to teach us in the continuum. Some of us are going to get new spouses. Some of us are going to get new jobs. Some of us are going to get new pastors. Some of us are going to get new friends. Some of us are going to get new houses, new neighborhoods, new cities. Watch this. New school, new friend, new everything. And repeat the same problem again. God has sent the storm we're in now to reveal to us what God has got to help us face in order to move forward. And I'm telling you that America and humankind is now forced by this pandemic and the politics that are not working across the world to face what we have ignored for a long time. Equality cannot be legislated. It must happen at a level of the heart. There must be a heart adjustment. We must see one another as equals, and we must treat each other in love. How are we going to do it? I'm glad you asked. I need to get out of here. I do. I need to get out of here. It's getting long, and I got it, but it's so good. I got to give you this. How do we as America and the world truly get out of a stuck rut in the midst of a pandemic and the politics that are not working? Democratic politics ain't working. Republican politics ain't working. Independent foolishness is not working. So how do we get unstuck? Here is what the priest discovered. When he realized that the problem that he couldn't move forward with, that God had sent him to, was the insecurities of his childhood and young adult life, he then transformed his prayer life to what I want you to hear. There is a saint in the Catholic Church named Saint Francis de Sales. He has a saying: do not worry about the trouble of tomorrow, for the God who is God of tomorrow will either give you the strength to endure the trouble of tomorrow, or he will give you the grace to not have to face the trouble of tomorrow. Be at peace. The priest stopped worrying about what he couldn't fix and dealt with what was in his hands, the moment. You can't worry about what you cannot fix. You can only worry about what's in your hand. The disciples are in a position where they can't control the sea, but they can deal with themselves. And the midst of this, recognizing that their experience as sailors, their experience as having gone through storms is not sufficient for them moving forward. All of a sudden, God not only can see them, but here is the second, and I'm going home. The second and final point is that while they can't see God, God can see them. Guess what? They are never out of the reach of God. God can see them, and God is able to reach them. Come here. God is able to reach us, and therefore in the text, in the midst of pandemics and politics, God shows up through Christ Jesus walking on water. Jesus walks on water and shows up and tells them in the midst of the pandemic and the politics, they think he's a ghost because they can't control it, because the pandemic and politics has them mixed up. And he says, take heart, it is I. In essence, in the Greek, he's saying to them, chill. God is right here. And I need for you to catch this as I go to my seat, that you can chill because God's presence is with us in the midst of the pandemic and the politics. God's message, God's presence, God is right here. We don't have to look for him. God is right here. Preacher, that sounds great, but how is that going to help me? Here's the key. Without Jesus on boat, the disciples can't move forward, and the wind is strong. With Jesus getting on the boat, the wind ceases. Here is the lesson. When you can't see God, God sees you, but you're never, secondly, out of the reach of God, which means when God's presence is with us, the wind ceases to bother us. In essence, how do we do that? Here it is. My favorite scripture in the Bible says this: there is no fear in love, because complete or perfect love casts out fear. The only way that we are going to get through this pandemic is that the love that we have for God has to grow so much that we can say, whether I know what's coming tomorrow or tonight does not matter. I know that God loves me. I know that God is with me. And since God before me, nothing can stand against me. And that's the shout moment in the text. I am shouting because what I learned is not the disciples are not out of the storm, not that I'm out of pandemic, not that I'm out of this situation, but I'm shouting because God is with me. And if God is with me, nothing can stop me. If God is for me, who can stand against me? And that's the shouting moment for you right now. Not that God has pulled you out, but that God has took care of you while you're still in it. Not that the cancer is gone, but God is a keeper in the midst of cancer. Not that the problems have evaporated, but that God has provided with problems still on your back. Have you rivers that seem uncrossable? Have you valleys that you cannot tunnel through? God specializes in things that seem impossible, and with God's presence, you can do anything but fail. Have a great day. May the Lord bless you. I'll see you next week with the conclusion of this particular passage: pandemic, politics, and the presence of God. I love you, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Listen for a special announcement. Hello, listen, St. John family. This is Pastor Washington, and let me start off by saying I am thankful and grateful to be your pastor. I love St. John, and I love you, and I pray that St. John loves me. St. John, you're special to me because I learned at St. John as a small child how Jesus' love will take me through no matter how old and how weak I become. I learned from Lois Bryant. I learned from Ruth Lewis. I learned with classmates, Courtney Hammond. I learned with friends from my childhood, Maya and Danya Mia. I learned from you, and I learned with them that Jesus loves us. This we know, for the Bible tells us so. I learned how to be a sunbeam for Christ and this church. With that in mind, I have a responsibility not just to the church, but I've learned that the church has a responsibility to its people. St. John taught me about God, and now St. John must now teach its community about the importance of being godly people. What that means is I need for every member of St. John, or if you're listening, those who are virtually members of St. John who live in the state of Georgia, particularly in Columbus, Georgia, I need for you to send me to the church email. I need you to email me at the church's email, which we're going to put on the screen right now. I need you to send to this email that you see right now your home address and your phone number. Listen, we have I know you're saying, I thought y'all had that. Listen, it ain't about what you thought we had. This is for a particular important. With the election coming up on November the 3rd, with the elections coming up in this season, I need you to send us your information. We have some vital information we need to mail to you that will help you understand the voting process and how to vote. Some of you may have already gotten your ballot in the mail. Some of you are looking for that. We have some information from the precincts to get in your hands so that you know what to do, how to do it, and so that you will not be left out. We can't trust things to go as they're planned. We've got to meet this challenge before it gets to us. So as St. John, as I call it our voter registration ministry, has expanded not just to register people to vote, but to give information to the community and to the members. As this ministry is developing and working behind the scenes, I need you to understand that we need to get this information to you. Please do me a favor. Email St. John at the St. John email, which is coming back on the screen. Send us your home address, phone number, so that we can get in your hands the very information you need about the upcoming election. I need you to know something. I need you to vote. I need you to use your voice. And yes, I need you to have soul power. Be encouraged, and please don't forget, do that as soon as possible so that we can get that information to you. I want you all to have a great day. I know that you hadn't heard it yet. So let me say it so we can get out of here. I wish you peace. I wish you love. And in the words of James Brown, I wish you soul power. Have a great week. Until we meet again.